This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Podcast. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, in studio host and producer of Dothan Football on 96.9 The Legend and Auburn Rider for last word on college football. This week on the podcast, flying solo this week, we do not have a guest, but that's fine. It is called the Phillip Jordan Podcast. We'll be looking back at last week's games in college football, just my takeaways from what I saw happen on Saturday. We'll live mostly in the SEC on the show today. Also kind of look ahead to this weekend's matchups with some interesting games. A top 5 matchup between Penn State and Ohio State is the highlight, but also we have some big matchups in the SEC as well. So we'll talk about that and more on this edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. You can check out the Phillip Jordan Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight up hater. You can also check out the show over at Wiregrass Daily News, my YouTube channel, Phillip Jordan Sports. You can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com and follow me on social media at pjordansec. All right, as I said off the top, no guest this week on the show. I had something we thought lined up. We just couldn't get it situated. Something happened there. Hey, that's fine. Again, it is a Phillip Jordan podcast, so I'll just give my thoughts on what I saw previous week. Don't always have to have a guest. It's always a fun thing to have an interview here on the show, but I am fully capable of going solo and just giving my thoughts on what I saw over the weekend. And so we're going to start off, and as I said, the SEC, next week is going to be interesting because we will have the first college football playoff rankings coming out. College basketball starting up next week too as well, so we got a lot of stuff coming up to talk about with different kind of people. But anyways, I want to start with a big game in the SEC. That was LSU-Texas A&M. That was primetime, 6:30 ABC. I thought LSU was going to win this game. LSU is who I picked to win this one. I really thought, okay, we're going to have a great opportunity. Alabama should beat Missouri. We'll get to that game in a second. That'll be the next one I'll talk about. But Alabama, LSU, they'll both win this week. They have an off week. And then Baton Rouge on the 9th. That's where game day is going to be at. But now, unfortunately, LSU lost. They lost 38-23. And in the first half, LSU was the better team. I mean, just the way they were playing. Garrett Nussmeier threw for over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first half, constantly getting pressure on Connor Wegman. He was 6 of 18 for 64 yards in the first half, multiple sacks on him. Texas A&M just could never get in a rhythm, and LSU was offensively with the passing game. Now, LSU did struggle running the ball in this game, which has kind of been an issue when I've watched LSU play this year. This team has great receivers. They're all over the field, and we know they've had some injuries at the beginning of the year at running back. But just 35 yards total rushing average, 1.6 yards per carry, 22 carries, just on 1 touchdown. So not a lot of running for this team in the game overall, but just focusing here on the first half, I mean, LSU looked like they were on their way to a win here, to get another win, to get to 7-1 instead of sitting at 6-2. And A&M just looked like they were in trouble. Connor Wegman just did not have time. I don't necessarily think all that's on him, but they made a change in the second half that really put them over the top. Because we come in the second half, Nussmeier has a meltdown, 3 interceptions. The first one was a bad one. Escape from the pocket, just forced something down the field that he shouldn't have made the throw. But then with 8:10 remaining in the third quarter, again, he throws that first interception. Then we see Marcel Reed come into the game, touchdown first play. He had 62 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. He was 2 for 2 for 7 yards, had the one big play, pass play down the field. But when you look at it, LSU just looked like a team that had not prepared in case the other quarterback come in, and they were not ready for the read option that A&M presented. And it's like, okay, Nussmeier throws that first interception, and then A&M gets a touchdown. And it's 17-14. They're at College Station, and all the momentum, all the energy was on A&M side, because before that, Now, the crowd, yeah, they would get into it from time to time. It was 17-7, but it really LSU had all the momentum, but A&M took all of that momentum, and then you combine that, again, lack of a running game. I feel like for LSU, if you had more of a running game, you could have kind of settled things down. Nussmeier seemed like he was out of sorts during the second half. They did do a good job at pressuring him. His overall stat line in the game, 25 for 50, 405 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But a solid running game for LSU, I think, would have helped settle things down, but they just didn't have that, so they had to keep throwing the ball. Look, they made plays at times. And then also the LSU special teams, they were 1 of 3 on field goal kicks. He had a bad snap on one. I mean, so those are some scoring opportunities that ended up hurting him as well. A&M 14-0 in the third quarter, 17-6 there in the fourth. I mean, they put up 31 points in the second half after just having 7 points. And you look at with Texas A&M, what's the decision here if you're Mike Elko? Do you go back to Connor Wigman, or do you stay with the hot hand in Marcel Reed? I think you should go with Marcel Reed. He just gives your team just a different element right now, and especially if Connor Wigman's getting pressure. I mean, Connor Wigman's not an unmobile or immobile quarterback, but at the same time, what Reed could do, and he has shown he can throw the ball. Yes, I know, 2 for 2. But when he had to fill in for Wigman early on in the year, he also showed that capability of being able to throw. I mean, it's just amazing because, I mean, yes, a lot of players left and Jimbo Fisher got fired after last year, all that stuff. But Elko, what he's doing with his team is amazing. They just look, they're more organized. And I feel like they just have a real coach there on the sideline now compared to what Jimbo Fisher. Anybody listened to me a long time knows how I feel with Jimbo Fisher. It's like you take away Jameis Winston from his career. He's an 8-4 football coach. That's what he was at Texas A&M most of the time. That's what he was mostly at Florida State outside of the Jameis Winston years. Now, looking ahead for both these teams, now LSU, as I mentioned, they're off. And then they'll play Alabama at home on the 9th, and at Florida, Vandy, and Oklahoma. So with LSU, you look at Alabama game. Of course, we're going to get Alabama in a second. But with them in this game with Alabama, LSU wins that game. They're at home. The crowd's going to be for them. It's going to be a great atmosphere on that Saturday night. And that's going to be an ABC game, too. You should beat Florida. You should beat Vanderbilt. You should beat Oklahoma. And then for LSU, you're sitting at 10-2, and you should be a playoff team with wins against Ole Miss and Alabama. But, Ole Miss needs to keep winning. Now, you look at Texas A&M. This week, they will be at South Carolina. So you have that matchup coming up. Then you're off. You have New Mexico State. You're at Auburn, and you're playing Texas. Now, Auburn's going to be an interesting deal with them. I know people laughing at me. They're 3-5. This is the greatest 3-5 team of all time. 4 of their 5 losses, they could have won. The Georgia game, okay, we know they weren't going to win that game. But the other games, Auburn could have been in one. Then you end with Texas. And I say that, okay, you beat South Carolina. You should. You're off, and you beat New Mexico State. So you'll be going into Auburn. You've got the one loss there. And then you're sitting at 9-1. So I could see a scenario with maybe Texas. You're going to Auburn, tough environment, which a lot of this also depends on what Auburn does in the next 2 weeks, playing Vanderbilt, and they play Louisiana Monroe. So if Auburn's 5-5, this could be a sneaky game for A&M if they're looking past Auburn, getting ready for Texas. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. But it's going to be interesting. Both these teams, look, LSU lost a game. It's not a playoff eliminator. Now, I do believe the Alabama-LSU game is a playoff eliminator because then that will put you at 3 losses. I mean, maybe an SEC team can get into the 12-team playoff with 3 losses, but I wouldn't bank on it. So if you're one of those 2 teams, you now know that game is big. Now, for LSU, if you had lost Alabama and you had 1 loss, that gives you kind of a mulligan, you got more wiggle room. But now for both teams, neither team can lose it. Alabama has been really, really good at home, but have not been as good on the road. So now let's jump into their game with Missouri. And I'm probably not going to spend too much time on this one just because they beat Missouri 34-0. Brady Cook was limited. He left about 4 minutes till halftime. Drew Pine, we saw what happened in Missouri last week when Drew Pine came into the game. It limits the offense. I feel bad for the guy. You keep hearing the announcers during the game talk about his height. And Booger McFarland brought up his height. Maybe he just can't see over the line of scrimmage. He was in there very early on, throws interception, Malcolm Moore. That game was 6-0 at that moment. So you're saying, okay, Missouri's offense hasn't been good. Alabama's kicked 2 field goals. So in that time of the game, it's still a close game. Missouri's defense had played well enough and obviously keeping them in the game. Then that turns into 13 points for Alabama at 13-0. And then it's 34-0 second half. We did see the other quarterback from Missouri. Missouri only had 72 yards passing, 167 on the ground. Jalen Milroe, he was solid here in this game. 16 of 26, 215, no passing touchdowns, 50 on the ground, and 1 rushing touchdown there. The team overall, I mean, they rushed for 271 yards. So big game there. Their front dominated, but once again, Brady Cook was not healthy, and then he was not in the game. Now, for Missouri, and I kind of talked about a 2-loss SEC team getting in. Missouri's not going to be one of those teams. Missouri could win out. They're not getting there because you had blowout losses to Texas A&M and now to Alabama. So you're pretty much eliminated, and you kind of had some not iffy performances, but some close calls. Last week against Auburn is one. Alabama, they did what they're supposed to. They won at home. They've been good at home. This is a team they should have beat, especially with a hampered quarterback with Brady Cook with Missouri. The team's been really good at home. We'll see what happens now. They got to go on the road against LSU again. They're off. LSU's off. We'll see. I don't think we really learned anything more about Alabama here just because you were playing a hurt Missouri team that was not going to be able to do anything on the offense side of the ball. All right, I will talk about Auburn. Hey, look, I cover a team. I write about a team. They're an SEC team. We're going to talk about Auburn, okay? Auburn gets a 24-10 lead. A win here, I thought, going for a quarter. They get that 24-10 lead. Okay, this team's going to blow it. They found ways to lose these games. Made a play there at the end zone, got an interception to really seal the deal. But the story was Jarquez Hunter. I mean, he was amazing in this game. 23 carries, 278, 2 touchdowns. Peyton Thornton had the early interception. I think he was like 1 of 6 at that point when he threw the pick, and after that he was 15 of 16 rest of the way. Overall, 20 of 26, 172, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And this is kind of what Auburn has needed to be. Just feed Jarquez Hunter, feed the running game, and just let Peyton Thornton be a game manager. Just build off of that with what Auburn can do. And the defense has played well this year, I think. The turnovers had destroyed this team in games. I know they should have beat Missouri last week with a 17-3 lead. They should have beat Oklahoma, the pick 6 there. But getting going with Jarquez Hunter is going to be key. Got Vanderbilt coming in. Let's see what Auburn can do moving forward. Texas beat Vanderbilt 27-24. Texas had a pretty solid lead at one point in the game, 21-10, 24-10. Kind of felt like at that moment, 8:54 left in the third quarter. Burt Auburn, the 40-yard field goal. So, okay, this is 24-10. They've got this under control. Vanderbilt did not give up. They got within 3 points there at the end. Stowers with an 8-yard touchdown pass from Diego Pavia. I mean, Pavia is just a gamer, man. He just comes to play every week. Vanderbilt is a tough out for anybody. I mean, he was 16-29, 143, 2 touchdowns. He did throw 2 interceptions. He also ran for 6-7 yards, which Vanderbilt is a run-based team. Texas did a good job at limiting that most of the way because it had 114 yards and 67 of that came from Diego Pavia. Now, I will say this. Quinn Ewers was not bad numbers, 27-37, 288, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. It just feels like since he's come back from that injury, he has not quite been right. It's not been 100% himself. So we'll see how this team does going forward with what they got. I mean, just looking at the Texas schedule, we know they've got Texas A&M to close out the way. They're playing, all right, they're off this week. Then they have the game with Florida, should win at Arkansas. That'd be interesting. That used to be a big rivalry in Kentucky. So you see those, they should win those games. They should be 10-1 when they play Texas A&M. Just looking at that team from that standpoint there. Vanderbilt's at 5-3. They go to Auburn this week. We'll see if Auburn can beat them there. Just kind of looking at the Vanderbilt schedule. They have South Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee. So I'm trying to say, what is the best shot? The South Carolina game looks like to me in Auburn. So you got the next 2 weeks, I think is Vanderbilt's shot to get that 6 wins so they can become bowl eligible. Just looking at the rest of the SEC, some other games. Arkansas beating Mississippi State 58-25. The Arkansas offense. I mean, Mississippi State is without a doubt the worst defense in the SEC. Their offense is not horrible, 25 points. Van Buren had another solid outing, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. They just can't stop anybody. Taylor Green was awesome, 23-29, 314 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. They got the running game going with Braylon Russell. He had 175 on the day. No touchdowns there. The go-to guy was Andrew Armstrong. Their defense wasn't great, but, I got to give Arkansas this, and I did some podcasts during the offseason and especially during the summer as we kind of leading up to the football season. Felt like Sam Pittman would be fired by the time we got to midway of the season. We're past that. I said Bob Petrino will probably be your interim. They have done well there with Arkansas, and this is a team that looks like they're on their way to potentially getting to maybe a bowl game, as we've been doing here. Let's look at their schedule. They play Ole Miss this week. That's at home. I mean, that's not – I would probably say Ole Miss should win that game, but I wouldn't be shocked if Arkansas pulled off the upset. They have Louisiana Tech. So that's probably where you're going to see, okay, Arkansas is going to get that 6th win and get to a bowl game there. Looking at Ole Miss, they beat Oklahoma 26-14. This was a home game, an early game. Oklahoma had the lead 14-10. Jackson Arnold in the offense there for Oklahoma moved the ball well, but the second half, it was a much, much different story for Oklahoma. And Ole Miss their defense was awesome. And overall in the game, the Ole Miss defense just got after Jackson Arnold. But I do think that it was the right decision to put him back in there. But yeah, Perkins, number 4, man, he had an awesome day for Ole Miss. So, as Ole Miss took care of business, you probably like to see more points for them, offense to be better. Oklahoma does have a really good defense. But Jackson Arnold, I do believe he is the right guy. And I'll just throw this out there. Dothan native, Bauer Sharp at tight end, former quarterback for Dothan down here where I'm at. 8 receptions, 53 yards, 1 touchdown. So he played well there. But it's just the Oklahoma offense is just not a good spot. The offensive line is not good. They don't have a lot of weapons around whoever's playing quarterback. But, again, I think Jackson Arnold's the guy. He was 22-31, 182, 2 touchdowns. We'll see what happens with Oklahoma. They are now 4-4. Ole Miss has a big one coming up in a few weeks. We're looking forward to that Alabama LSU matchup. Also that day, you're going to have Georgia, who's playing Florida this week. But that's going to be a big one there coming up. They have Florida. Of course, they have the Egg Bowl on the Friday after Thanksgiving. So, is Ole Miss out of the playoff race? If you can upset Georgia, you're back in it. Obviously, you lose that game, you're out of it. I mean, I don't. If you're asking me to pick that game right now, I do not foresee a great game coming out for Ole Miss in that one. So that's just kind of like an SEC wrap up. SEC looking at the SEC from this past weekend. I am going to take a little bit of a break, play some promos for you guys for DGO Strategies, Wiregrass Daily News, and Dothan Wolves Football on 96.9 The Legend. But after that, I will look at some other stuff that happened around the country in Week 9, and we'll pick some games for Week 10 in college football right here on the Phillip Jordan Podcast.
96.9 The Legend is your connection to classic country legends. But Digio Strategies has other options too. News Talk 103.9 is your source for America's top news and entertainment shows. Like Rick and Bubba in the morning, Glenn Beck from 9 till 11 a.m., and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton middays from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and others fill your day with the latest news and views from America's top conservative voices. America at Night and Coast to Coast AM keep you company and connected throughout the night. Plus, Fox News, the Alabama Radio Network, and Wiregrass Daily News keep you informed with national, international, state, and local news. And with more musical choices like All the Hits, 106.7 KMX, Today's Country, 95.5 WTVY, and Music 107.7. Digio Strategies gives you more choices and more variety. Listen on air, online, and on our apps. 96.9 The Legend is just the beginning.
High school football season, and that means the Dothan Wolves are back on 96.9 The Legend. Every Thursday night, check out the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show with Jerry Coleman and Ken Lambert as they sit down with Dothan Wolves head coach Jed Kennedy about the previous game and preview the upcoming opponent. If you missed the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show, you can check out the podcast at wiregrassdailynews.com or go to your favorite podcast catcher and just type in Dothan High School Football. And, of course, every Friday night, pregame starts at 6:45 and kickoff is at 7 for all the Dothan Wolves football action. All right, welcome back into the Phillip Jordan Podcast. Just talking about the Dothan Wolves. If you're here down in the South Alabama area, the last game of the season is this Friday against Godby. So please check us out on I-69 The Legend. Check out the app, all that good stuff there. So, just looking around college football from this past weekend, results that kind of stick out to you. Oregon just completely dominated against Illinois. Illinois is not a bad team, but Oregon was just on their game. Penn State getting a victory over Wisconsin. Penn State ranked number 3 last week there. They did well. Drew Aller was knocked out of the game due to an injury, and they still found a way to win and did what they were supposed to against Wisconsin. Of course, you had Ohio State beating Nebraska, and Ohio State did not play great against Nebraska. They only had 64 rushing yards. I mean, the passing game was there. Howard was 13 of 16 for 221 and 3 touchdowns. Which this is the same Nebraska team just got blown out by Indiana. And Indiana's really good at 8-0. They got a win over Washington. So I'm kind of concerned with Ohio State going this game, but then they're playing Penn State. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, Miami blew out Florida State there. BYU still undefeated. They're in the Big 12, just trying to figure out who's that team in the Big 12. Of course, we were all kind of loving the story of Navy and Army both undefeated. The Navy losing 51-14, 5 turnovers. They destroyed any chance for Navy because once they get behind just the style of offense that they play, it's just hard for them to catch up and get back in it. So that's just kind of how he's got things going on right now nationally. And then now let's look at this week. First, let's look at this week's games just from an SEC standpoint. At 11, you have Ole Miss playing Arkansas. This is in Arkansas. Like I said, Ole Miss, if they win out, they should be a playoff team, I think, because you'll have a win over Georgia. Arkansas has played well. Look, I think Ole Miss will win. I think we're going to see some points in this one. I just think Arkansas's offense is not going to keep up with Ole Miss. And the Ole Miss defense is going to make some stops here too. Probably – I could see like Ole Miss winning like a 38-24, 38-21 type of game. Vanderbilt's playing at Auburn. They're honoring the 2004 Auburn team that went undefeated. Didn't get to play for that championship, but went undefeated. Auburn's a 7-point favorite in this one, so a lot of people's probably looking, okay, Vanderbilt's 5-3. They beat Alabama. They came close against Texas. Auburn's 3-5. Maybe they found something. If Auburn comes in and commits to the run game again, I think Auburn should win this if Peyton Thorne doesn't turn the ball over. He's got 7 interceptions on the year, and he's fumbled the ball too. But Hugh Freeze likes to throw the ball, so you kind of wonder, will Hugh Freeze kind of fall back into what he wants to do, or will Auburn go to run game? I'll just say if Auburn goes with their run game, I mean, I don't expect Jarquez Hunter to run for 278 yards again, but get 150 yards out of him and just get some timely passing by Thorne, I think it should be all right. And they're going to want revenge because, they didn't lose Vanderbilt last year. They blew Vanderbilt out. But Diego Pavia, New Mexico State, came into Auburn and won. A lot of these guys are going to remember that, and they're going to probably want to get some payback on them. Of course, you got Jerry Kill and all them other guys that was part of that New Mexico State team on staff there at Vanderbilt. Maine at Oklahoma. Oklahoma should roll in this one. Florida at Georgia, the world's largest cocktail party. Yes, that's right. We're going to call it that on this podcast. Georgia should win. Georgia should roll in this one. And it should be an easy day there in Jacksonville for the Bulldogs. UMass at Mississippi State. UMass playing another SEC team. Mississippi State should get their second win of the year in this one. A&M at South Carolina. This is a big test for A&M in this standpoint. South Carolina is not a bad team. They're good enough if you play bad enough where they can beat you. Just ask Alabama. Should have got a win there. Let's just see how Texas A&M recovers the big win. Are they going to still be celebrating the LSU win, or are they ready to turn the page and move on to South Carolina? Again, they're better than South Carolina. They should beat South Carolina. But if A&M doesn't come in this game with the right mindset, it's at night. And look, that place there, William Bryce Stadium, is a tough, loud place to play at night. It's going to be a close game. Now, A&M is only favored by 2.5. A&M should win this. This is going to be close. Kentucky, Tennessee. Kentucky's defense we'll probably try to keep them in again. Tennessee's favorite 16.5 points. I just don't think Kentucky's going to have any offense here. Tennessee's defense is really good, too. That front with James Pierce is amazing. And the run game with Sampson, we just saw what Florida and Auburn did in back-to-back weeks against this Kentucky defense. It was said before the Florida game that you couldn't run on Kentucky, but the last 2 weeks we've seen teams just gash them. And if that's an indicator of what we're going to see out of Kentucky defense, I think Tennessee is going to just run all over Kentucky in this one. I think they're going to win by a couple of touchdowns. And Nico makes some big throws in the game as well. Now looking at some top 25 matchups around the country for this week. The big game, 11 o'clock, it's on Fox. Number 4, Ohio State at number 3, Penn State. Ohio State 6-1 on the year. Penn State 7-0. Ohio State is a 3.5-point favorite. Look, I'm going to go with Ohio State in this game. So the simple fact is we have not seen Penn State win a big game under James Franklin. And then you got the help of Drew Aller. How will he be? Now, these are 2 top defenses. This is not going to be a pretty sexy football game. This is going to be low scoring. This is going to be defense, turnovers. Ohio State's going to have to find a way to get their running game going, though. They're going they don't have to run for 200 yards, but consistently to get the pressure off of Will Howard. Ohio State's the number 2 defense in the country. They're going to put everything on Drew Aller in this one. And last year in this moment, he didn't play great. He did not play great in this moment. And then Penn State's got number 4 defense. I'm going to go Ohio State win a 17-10 football game in this one. Duke is playing at Miami. Miami, I believe, is the second best team in the ACC. I think Clemson is a better team. I would pick Clemson if the 2 teams were playing each other. Duke's a good team. They're 6-2. And Miami has shown defense is not their cup of tea, so they're probably going to see some points in this one. But the Miami offense is just going to be too much for Duke to handle in that one. And just looking across Louisville at Clemson, Louisville is a solid team. Can they give? This is probably the best team Clemson has played probably since Georgia, but I don't think it will be much of a game. Pittsburgh and SMU is going to be quite interesting. Pittsburgh is undefeated 7-0. They're only ranked 8th team. SMU 7-1. They're ranked number 20. I like SMU. I think their offense just is a little bit better than Pittsburgh. So I'm going to go with those teams there on that one. And that's going to do it for the solo edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. We almost went 30 minutes with just me just running my mouth about college football. Did you disagree with anything I said? You can always hit me up on social media at PJordanSEC. And if you're listening on Wiregrass Daily News, check out the podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're checking out on YouTube, please subscribe. Really appreciate it. Hey, and if you leave a comment on YouTube on the show, I will respond to it on the show. If you leave a review, I check them all the time. I will respond to those as well. I will read them on the show. You can email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a great week. Remember to check out the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show on Thursday night, 8 o'clock on 96.9 The Legend. If you do miss it or you're not in the area for 96.9 The Legend, you can check out the podcast, Dauphin High School Football. Just find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. And, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the Dothan Wolves play the season finale. They're not going to the playoffs against Godby from Tallahassee at Ripue Stadium at home in Dothan. Pre-game starts at 6:45. Kickoff is at 7 over on 96.9 The Legend. And, as always, please check out my written work over at Last Word on college football, and check out Wiregrass Daily News for all the latest news and headlines around the Wiregrass. You can check out on the website, or you can check out over on the Facebook page as well. Once again, hope everybody has a great week. Enjoy the games. We got some big games this weekend, and we'll be back next week to recap it and hopefully have a guest next week. Until next time, bye-bye.